This is the meeting of the Planning Committee on the 24th of June. Could I get a roll call, please?
Good morning. Director Diana Mayer,
Here.
Vice Chair Ranjiv Kush,
Here.
Chair Larry Russell.
Here.
And currently not present are Directors Matt Sampson and Jed Smith.
Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye. Public comment on non-agenda matters.
There are none.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting from May 27, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Director Mayer,
Aye.
Vice Chair Kush,
Aye.
and Chair Russell.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we get to business. Water Efficiency Master Plan status update.
Good morning, directors. Paul Sellier, Water Resources Director. Just while Carrie is pulling up her presentation, we've heard a lot of interest in looking in some detail at Tier 4 and the high water users. And I just wanted to mention that while this presentation doesn't necessarily address that, we are working on that, and we'll be coming back to you at a subsequent meeting with a deeper dive on those high water users. So without further ado, here's Carrie and Adrian with the Water Efficiency Program update.
Thanks, Paul. Carrie Pollard, Water Efficiency Manager. All right, so a quick overview. We're going to walk through the Water Efficiency Master Plan and do a quick refresher. We'll talk about some emerging collaborations and outreach, which Adrian will primarily cover. And then we'll look at some new incentive programs that staff has developed for supporting our customers and reducing their water use, and then wrapping up with next steps. So development of the Water Efficiency Master Plan. So the plan was adopted in July of last year. So it's just less than a year old. And it's a 5-year plan, and it establishes water use targets with the goal of maximizing the savings within, the community's interests, recognizing that for us to achieve water savings, we need our community to engage with us. So the plan establishes a 2045 district-wide goal of 106 gallons per capita per day. So that's a long-term goal. But to achieve that long-term goal, what we did is establish annual targets for program participation. So specific rebate programs, so number of square feet removed each year, and then the associated water savings to really help us achieve that 106 GPCD in 2045. So the plan's a 5-year plan, right? We recognize that as we developed it and when it was adopted a year ago, new technologies we weren't aware of could come up in the next 5 years and even, beyond. And so we needed to adaptively manage our water efficiency program. And you'll see some new programs we're presenting today that aren't included in the master plan, but we think will support our customers in reducing their overwater use. And then finally, there's an annual report back to the board, right? Again, we don't want to have a plan that's just put on the shelf that establishes these goals and never reports back. That's why we have these annual tracking. And so in August, once the fiscal year is done, we'll come back just like we did last August and look at participation, water savings, kind of next steps, and so on. So we do plan on having an annual report back.
Barry, before you move on, can you just remind us about the process that was used to develop this plan and the timeline for developing this plan?
Yeah, it was extensive. We started it in 2020, end of 2019, early 2020, and then the drought hit. And many of the programs that were in that initial plan were then implemented as part of our drought response and retained following the drought. And so we recognized that, as we move forward in 22, 23, we needed to switch gears. We didn't want a plan that said basically do all the things we've already been doing. We wanted to take another look and say, now we've been doing these programs, where do we want to go? What makes sense for us as a community? And so it was a multi-year process. We had community workshops, we had many board workshops. So we felt it was quite extensive. It really was quite extensive.
Right. And as you're going to remind us today, it outlines a set of activities and steps, recognizing that there's room for adaptation as new technologies emerge. But there is a process, a strategy that we have developed together with our community that we're now working on so that water efficiency is not really an ad hoc activity where when new ideas pop up, we just go, let's go in that direction or this direction. We're trying to follow a process that we've all developed together.
Correct. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
Along with that process, if we were to double the incentive and throw another $1 million at it, because we do have some excess money at the end of this fiscal year, what effect do you think that would have?
You know, it's for us to achieve additional savings, it requires that community engagement, right? So throwing more money, we'll hear from some of our survey results about our turf replacement program and if more money would have made a difference and whether or not it wouldn't have. And so I think we'll touch on that a bit.
And Carrie, we also, maybe you were going to get to it, that we're piloting the increase. Can you speak to that in incentives?
Right. And so we are currently piloting an increased rebate amount. So right, we're just shy of $5, which is the most we've ever offered. We did $3 during the height of the drought. And so, you know, we've increased that to $4.68, utilizing some grant funding and other funding. And so again, so that just started in January. You know, we're only 6 months or so in. These are large projects for some folks. And so it takes a little bit of time, but that'll be certainly something we continue to track to say, does it make sense for Intuit to increase our rebate? And what is the potential with that increase, looking at what we've done so far? Thanks, Ben. That's a good reminder. And then the final bullet I want to touch on, because I think it's really important, that when we started the roadmap process and we established a water supply goal, it was 8,500 acre feet. And we have not seen the rebound that we had anticipated. And we feel so confident that the savings, the demands have been reduced. We've attributed a 2,000 acre foot reduction in that total goal, just really showing that the community is on board and engaged with us. And we're not seeing that rebound that we had originally anticipated. So within the master plan, there's 5 key strategies. The first is enhanced technology and analysis. So this would be things like AMI, which we'll hear from Craig in the next item, but also our customer portal for, you know, technology kind of pieces. But when we think about analysis, it's taking that deeper dive that we'll be doing at a future board meeting of looking at our high water users, but it's also our program evaluation. You know, are our programs effective? Are we getting the level of engagement we want? What do our customers think about the programs and why are they not maybe following through, or maybe they are, right? So that's program evaluation, and then kind of course correct if needed based on that analysis. You may recall when we adopted the master plan, there were a number of policies that we cleaned up, internal district-wide policies that were amended and altered to align with the policies that were within the plan, specifically, right, doing away with the gray water ordinance and establishing a limit on turf installations. And there's other policies, right? Statewide policies and regulations that we also need to comply with. And so those are important that we wanted to recognize as part of the plan. Looking at internal water loss control programs, we spoke to the board at prior meetings around the opportunities that we're considering around reducing district losses. So we're currently in the middle of a pilot. It's a 3-month pilot. It'll end at the end of the month. So we look forward to bringing that back to the board also with our findings and the technology and review and pilots that we've done. So more to come on that. We're finding outreach and water education. So Adrian will speak to some of our outreach campaigns and kind of what we're doing to, you know, engage our customers in new ways. And then the water education piece, this is our school ed piece. We're doing a whole refresh, and that we plan on bringing back right before the school year starts. We have some new exciting programs that we want to share with you as well. And then finally, all of these really kind of overarchingly supporting our customers to save water through innovative programs. So this is the adaptive management. These are the new programs. Maybe they weren't originally in the plan with goals, but they're new programs we feel can be effective to help our community. So these are really our key strategies. I did want to include a bit of information here about tracking our GPCD because we report to the state in calendar year as opposed to fiscal year, which we're doing for our programmatic progress. So in 2024, we were at 104 gallons per person per day. This is district-wide. In comparison, in 2021, we were at 102. So we're seeing an ever so slight increase in demands. And again, the goal of the master plan was really to minimize the rebound from the drought. And I think you can see we're doing a really good job. What's interesting about the 104 GPCD, we took a deeper dive to say, it actually as part of the analysis we're preparing for the board, took a deeper dive into where are we seeing these increases. So single family residential customers, water use is down 3% compared to 2021. Multifamily is flat. Businesses, so commercial, industrial, institutional, is up 15%. And dedicated irrigation, so that's our schools, our parks, are up 9%. And so single family customers, we're doing a great job. They're on board, right? They're engaged. It's really very interesting for us to say, okay, let's take a step back. And, while focusing on high water users is always going to be a target audience, someone that we're going to try, a group that we're going to always try and reach effectively, the business community and our irrigation customers are going to be, we know, needs to be our next big push. So that was kind of interesting. So more to come on that kind of analysis as we move forward.
Carrie, just before you move on, we do see the regular monthly updates on water production, and I know. So this goes through the end of the 2024 calendar year, but we're continuing to see some increase in demand. Now, you're suggesting that that's not that doesn't correspond to level of rebounds that we've seen in the past following droughts, that the increasing demand that we're seeing is still more gradual than what we've seen in the past. And you remain confident then that the 2,000 additional, that our savings of 2,000 acre feet that we're now counting towards our water supply goal is going to remain solid. That's still your impression.
It really is. I mean, if you look at historic droughts, I mean, this slide only goes back to 2000, but you can see in 2008, 9, 10, it's basically a 1 year, if I can get my mouse up here, it's basically a 1 year dip and then back up, right? And then another maybe 2 years max. The fact that we're seeing that GPC just sit flat it's really interesting. And to be honestly, I mean, I didn't expect it to carry on so long with such a slight increase. So I think in my professional opinion, we're doing great. I think that we're on track.
That's encouraging. I think this data point that the increase, we are seeing a very flat level of demand among residential customers. To me, that's new. I hadn't heard that before. That's quite interesting. And it does allow us to then set, as you said, some priorities for activities going forward.
Right. All right. So now we're going to move on to refining outreach with emerging collaborations, and Adrienne will take over from here.
Thanks, Carrie. Adrienne Mertens, Communications Public Information Manager. So really, when we're talking about refining our outreach, we're focused entirely on kind of new and bolstered efforts on our landscaping, outdoor water use, since that's where the greatest savings can be achieved. And so as part of the master plan, kind of pivoting from where we are was one of the guiding elements identified in the plan for outreach. And in the past, we've really focused when we were trying to engage with our early adopters. Carrie gave a nice timeline through the drought, kind of that more sense of urgency type of behavior change. And getting customers to take advantage of our outreach activities or of our program offerings. It was really focused on promoting what the district has to offer. Participate in our Cash for Grass program. We'll give you money for replacing your lawn. And so now as we move past those early adopters and focus on kind of this next phase of customers that we hope to engage and motivate, we're really trying to think differently about how we promote our programs. And so we've been working on some new campaign components that kind of refocus that advertising. We're working with an outside agency right now on new campaign messaging and materials. And so this slide, I've highlighted some of the things we've come up with. And you'll see just through the messaging that change. It's let your lawn go and let something better grow. That's one of our primary taglines. A secondary, the grass is greener when it's gone. And benefits highlighted. It kind of vary. And as we were putting together some of these messaging components, we were looking at our survey data from our formal survey that we did in 2023 of our customers. We know that especially with our Cash for Grass program, people are very familiar with that incentive, but has the least amount of participation. It's a big change for people to go that direction, and we recognize that, and it can seem like a big task to take on. But we also know that people do care about water savings from that survey. We also looked at some of Carrie's more informal surveys that she's done with past Cash for Grass participant and other rebate participants. And we know from them that there's design inspiration and guidance needed. And there's a lot of different reasons that people are motivated to change their yards. Aesthetics, they want to lower their bill, they want to take advantage of the rebate while we have it at the highest level. So we were thinking about all these things when we put this together. We're not limiting ourselves to the benefits that we focus on because we know that it's different for every customer. And so in different communication strategies that we're utilizing, we're focusing on kind of these different benefits to highlight. And I've listed them out here. And then kind of the last message is, and we can help to cover that cost at nearly $5 a square foot, our current rebate incentive. And so really flipping around where we put the priority, and we want to try to inspire people to think about what their outdoor landscape can be, and that it can be reimagined and repurposed into something else. Next slide. Thanks. And so another really important part of developing the campaign is having really compelling visuals. And that was actually something that was clearly identified in our master plan, is we've got to have good imagery to back up the messaging. And, a lot of people are visual and we want them to help to see what their spaces can be. And so we've been thinking about that. We need some work with our visual assets that we have in-house. We've kind of exhausted the inventory of photos and other graphics that we've utilized in our campaigns over the last several years. And to really take this fresh approach, we've implemented a couple strategies. They're in progress right now that we're excited about. The first, rather than going the more traditional route of working with a graphic designer to develop kind of a diagram or illustrations of landscapes, we're actually working with a local and somewhat popular landscape design service to create redesigns of two different real Marin residential landscapes. And so those are paper designs. And out of it, we're going to get these 3D photo renderings of actual landscapes. And we're focusing in two different areas. One will be a lawn transformation. So the existing property is a large lawn. It's tired. And there's definitely a lot of room to develop that into something beautiful and more water efficient. And the second is kind of a firescaping upgrade, and we'll get into more talk about firescaping later, but we've been doing some collaborative work with Fire Safe Marin around kind of the different zones of your property, and talking about best practices for where to plant things, how to keep things away from the home when you're thinking about your landscape design, to ensure that your home is also fire resilient. And so the second property right now, the kind of before photos of that, it's overgrown. There's definitely room for improvement there, and a lot of different small changes that can be made to update the property to be more fire and water smart. And then the next kind of visual asset project we're working on is a professional photo shoot with one of our previous Cash for Grass customers. They participated in the program in 2022, and their transformed landscape is thriving and it's looking great and is a great time to get out there. We actually had the photographer out there first thing this morning, just scouting the property to make sure we have right lighting for it, but we will be doing a professional shoot out there so we can get some really quality images to use for all of our outreach material. And that homeowner lives in Mill Valley, so local customer. And then the third thing is kind of a bigger project. It's an interactive event display. We're just getting started with the outside firm we're working with on our collateral materials to help us to develop some sort of piece that can really become a conversation starter when we're out at events. We want something that attracts people to our booths, makes us stand out and look a little different, and also creates this immediate space for our staff to engage in conversations about our Cast for Grass program, our other landscape or outdoor efficiency incentives, and talk to people about their landscapes and help to start planting the seed of different things they can do to make their landscapes more water efficient.
Adrian, just wanted
Yeah.
to comment on this
Sure.
because this has probably been one of the more important learning pieces for me as I've engaged with our customers regarding landscaping and water use. I've always sort of just had this perception, well, people understand that grass uses a lot of water. You can convince them to stop watering, great savings, good for our sustainability. I think what I didn't appreciate, and what I think certainly our program here has appreciated much more than myself, is that for so many of our customers, the way their landscaping looks is incredibly important. It's not just, it's uses too much water, we'll just stop watering it and
Yeah.
let it go. That's not an option for many, many people. The investments that they've made in the aesthetics of their environment are critical. So we're just not going to get them to stop watering without giving an alternative that's affordable and attractive.
Yeah.
That's something I just did not appreciate until I went out and started meeting with customers to talk about landscaping water use.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because that's definitely heavy on our minds and is, and I'm sorry I didn't emphasize it more, but definitely a key driver in the campaign material that we're developing. Beautiful, vibrant, colorful, functional, kind of outdoor living spaces. We're trying to really move beyond just, we'll pay you to take out your grass, but really talk about the vision of their yard, that it become this outdoor oasis for their family to enjoy. That's certainly been on our mind. It's something we're working with the ad agency on, and that it's really trying to tap into kind of that more inspirational, and we hear you, and this is, in addition to saving water, certainly about trying to show us what you can do instead. So I think that is just as important to us and definitely has been helping to drive what we're coming up with, and is also what kind of led to the need for better visuals. We just didn't have that in our inventory to help kind of tell the story we're trying to. And so it exists here in Marin. We just have to go and get it. So we're working on that.
Right.
All right, so still focused on our landscaping outreach. One other thing that is identified in our master plan around outreach is that targeted approach. And not that we're abandoning all of our broader outreach and connecting with all of our customers, but kind of taking new steps to really target and narrow in using our customer data that we have available to us to find our higher water users. And in this case, around our Cash for Grass program, especially finding our customers who have the larger lawns. And Carrie's team has a great list they put together. It's about 36,000 customer accounts, and those are customers who have a 50 square foot piece of lawn or larger on their property. And so this has kind of become our custom list for this round of target marketing that we're doing. And we have a number of different strategies that we're working on or have already gone kind of out into the universe to reach our customers. But there's a few different things. First, we have PSAs currently running. These are via audio streaming services, and so not necessarily tied just to Spotify or to Pandora or podcasts, but really any of those services that our customers may be on are PSAs, which they're written scripts. And we use kind of these different storylines. We have 3 different storylines running. For example, one is like a husband and wife. Their children have gone away to college, and their lawn that used to be used for the kids to play is lonely and really underutilized now. And they're trying to reimagine their outdoor living space and what it could be instead, and having this conversation about it. And ultimately are bringing up our program to help support their transformation. But anyway, so these ads are being served to any of our customers within that custom list of 36,000 as they're utilizing streaming services. And then we also have digital ads that are running right now. And I've got a little screenshot of one up there. The grass is greener when it's gone. So wherever they're browsing online, those ads are following them. Again, this is served to that custom list of customers. And then we're working right now on a postcard that'll be mailed to that list. We're going to do one midsummer, and it's kind of a planner message. We don't necessarily want to encourage people to be working on a lawn transformation in the middle of summer. However, people are heavily using their yards right now. And so we know as they're out there and using the space and loving it, or maybe not loving it, it's a good time to plant the seed that we have this program. What would you ultimately want out here if you could make a change? And we can help you do it. And here's some of the benefits of that. So we plan to run that here in the next couple weeks. And then in the fall will be kind of a follow-up mailer, which is more of the take action message when it is the right time to begin the transformation project.
Carrie, do we know the overlap between these 36,000 targeted customers and our higher tier residential customers?
They're definitely on that list. Yeah.
All right. And so, as I mentioned, we haven't completely abandoned our broader kind of service-wide area outreach, and we have bolstered that in areas where it makes sense, even utilizing some of our new campaign materials. We are sponsoring the water stations at the Marin County Fair this year. There's 6 different water stations set up. The fair begins next week and runs through the weekend. And we are having advertising wrapped around those water stations, and it is using our new campaign materials. That Shine is one of 3 different designs that we have, that bottom graphic there, that are going to be wrapped around these water stations where people go up to fill their water bottle. It has a QR code to our program, but again, in this clever way, kind of planting the seed about the program. The fair's theme is Bugtastic this year, so we actually emphasize kind of how, by introducing local native plants into your yard, you're attracting pollinators, and so that we could also tie into the theme there. And then we are taking advantage of some community event advertising opportunities where they're available at the events we're out in the community. And we've got some new banners that we've produced that we're putting up when we're out at events. That picture at the top is from the Fairfax Festival. Again, just promoting the program and hoping that can help with conversation starting at the booth around our program. And then finally, the Eco-Friendly Garden Tour. This is a Sonoma-Marin Water Saving Partnership program. This year, we did bolster kind of local advertising around that to try to encourage more registrants to attend the tour. We had 19 gardens throughout Sonoma and Marin that were part of that tour, and 3,600 people registered to attend, which is great. And then continuing with full service area-wide efforts. This is a Fire Safe Marin collaboration that will be running in our July and August bills. We ended up doing a special edition of our Summer on the Waterfront newsletter, and the entire issue is dedicated to this co-authored piece we did with Fire Safe Marin, all on the landscape, and how to implement fire and water smart techniques and practices into your landscape design. And so the whole front section kind of focuses on 4 different key areas and things to think about everything from pathways and separating kind of your plantings to ensure defensible space between things, talking about the zone 0 area and making sure you have a clearance 5 feet from the home, within the 0 to 5 foot perimeter of the home. And then the backside actually emphasizes maintenance and how that's just as important as the initial design, both for water and fire smart reasons. And then we offered some suggestions on some planting alternatives for privacy screening, which can be a real fire hazard. And so Carrie's team had a list of some options to help guide customers in that area. So this will run in July and August bills, and it was great collaboration with Fire Safe Marin. And I'll let Carrie go over a couple others.
Just maybe just one more.
Yeah.
As we have transitioned to the Paymentus now bill payment system, I'm guessing that more customers have moved also to an online payment and perhaps auto payment. If that's the case, I'm not sure if that's true, but if that's, are we potentially losing eyes on bill inserts through that?
I would say that's not the case yet. We know that that will be. We've sort of held off on a larger ramp up campaign of getting people to move to the online billing system while we were still kind of early in that transition and phasing in people that were already in online. And we had a couple bumps along the road that we've gotten smoothed out now, but it is on our minds. We actually have some materials ready to start promoting, moving people to online bill pay. And we recognize that, yes, that will be both a good and kind of a tougher thing in terms of having that bill insert be such a great outreach tool for us that if we do end up with more adopters of online payment use. So we'll have to think around that. There is a way to still get your digital bill inserts. I'm not sure with Paymentus. I know with our old system, we didn't have a way of seeing if people were actually clicking and reading that. That's actually a good thing for me to follow up on, and I will. But they do have the ability to access the digital bill inserts. Again, it's just, I don't know how often that's happening.
And I could just add to that, when we think about AMI and a customer portal, there's an opportunity there for single login, right? So you open it up and you see your bill, but then you also can see on the screen, it's a website, right? You can see the bill stuffers and the newsletters and all of those right there in front of you as well. Hopefully, ideally, someday we'll let people apply for their rebates on that same portal, right? Kind of one-stop shop for folks. So kind of building on what Adrian spoke to around the Fire Smart Landscapes and our collaboration with Fire Smart Marin, we're also working with Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. We recognize that there's a lot of overlap with the work we're doing, right? We're both trying to talk to customers about changing their landscape. And it's an opportunity for us to cross-promote what we're doing when they're out in the field and vice versa. And so when our staff's out in the field, we're talking to folks also about wildfire risk home evaluation program and their incentives or grant programs that they offer. And then in turn, they're doing the same, talking about our rebate programs. And so we've just kind of initiated this kind of a loose arrangement agreement and understanding that, talking to customers about, they're going to think about changing their landscape. We want to have them think about all of it, in a holistic way. Another program that we've discussed with them is we evaluated an alignment with the Zone 0 grant turf and our turf incentive. So the authority was offering and has continued to, although they talked about canceling it, Zone 0 grant funding. They actually retained that this year, which is great, but there was some discussion around, should we roll that into our turf incentive? So we don't need to do that at this time, but it is something we're thinking about. How do we collaborate more meaningful with them to, engage our customers? And finally, working with them on the use of materials for chipper days as free mulch giveaways. Like one of their highest costs is disposal of mulch. So if we can find a location, they're really open to it, but finding a location where material we don't want brought back into landscapes can be set aside and removed. And then the material that would make sense for chipping and mulching and distribution could be piled up and made available to our customers. And so we think it's a good collaboration opportunity there.
Carrie, I didn't realize that the MWPA was now promoting our incentives in turf rebate. That seems like the sort of the I mean, that's like the perfect example of cross-agency or interagency collaboration. That's really encouraging. Yeah, the more of that sort of, leverage that we can obtain from their programs, obviously the better. So great to
sure.
see that.
And they have a captive audience, right? A lot of theirs are requirements. And so it takes a little
Right.
bit of, we're willing to give them a little bit of money if they're willing to make a few extra changes while they're making, some landscape improvements for Fire Smart Landscaping or home hardening. Yeah. Kind of building off this idea of mulch distribution and chipper days, we just last weekend collaborated with the city of Mill Valley, and we did a compost and mulch giveaway at Hockey Park. And we had 54 folks show up and take compost and mulch, everything from a pickup truck and shovels to garbage cans and, trash bags, whatever they could bring. So it was great. And there's still some materials left over. We made 40 cubic yards in total available. And so that'll be there till it's gone. I think Adrian did a post this morning to remind folks that it's still out there and available if they were interested in picking it up. And so I'm continuing to collaborate with others in our community that are working in similar space. So now moving on to our incentive program. I wanted to start with a list of all of our current offerings. As a reminder, right, we're not going to go into the details of each of these today. We'll be back in August to talk about levels of participation we had targeted and how many, actually, square feet of turf was removed and the associated water savings. But today what I wanted to do is bring forward a couple of new incentive programs that we have not talked about before. And so those new programs are starting with a Moen Flow Smart Water Shutoff device. So this is very similar to Flume with some very distinct differences. It's an inline device, so Flume attaches to the meter, so it's very easy to install, and there's batteries you have to replace. This Moen device is actually in line with the pipe. It's hardwired, and it has an actuator valve that'll turn the water off if there's a leak. The California Water Efficiency Partnership has a direct distribution program with Moen, similar to what they have with Ratio and Flume. And the staff recommendation is to utilize our funds that we have on deposit with them to offer the same incentive we offer for Flume, which is $136. And so while the installation is much higher, the device cost is much higher than Flume, the value to us is exactly the same, right? It's the same leak detection. It's the same disaggregate water use by fixture, et cetera, that we're getting from Flume. And so we feel like it's, similar water savings. It makes sense to offer the exact same amount. So that's the first program.
Where would they put it?
Yeah, so it's after your shutoff, right? And somewhere very close to the house. It has to have a plug.
But I
Yeah.
mean, there's not any room in the meter box, I don't
No,
think.
no, no. It wouldn't be in the meter box. It would be at the house on the customer's property.
So it would only address leaks in the house, not
Yes, it would
on
not address
lateral.
mainline leaks, lateral leaks, correct? Yep.
Carrie, I've heard from some customers that the risk of leaks is a key driver of homeowners insurance. Would installation of this type of device be something that would be recognized in insurance?
It would. And Flume often isn't because it doesn't actually turn the water off.
Right.
It's just the notification. So yes, it would, which is value add to the customer if the higher, recognizing a higher cost. So, yeah. Right. If their insurance is requiring it, then they have options. And this would be one of those options. So the second program is a commercial kitchen food defroster, and the name of the device is called Conserve. Very creative, these folks. So what it is a recirculation device. It attaches to a sink in a commercial kitchen, and it improves the common but questionable practice of thawing food under just running water, right? And so what it does is it recirculates the water while retaining an appropriate temperature and agitation so that it meets health and safety requirements while saving a lot of water. Metropolitan Water District of Southern California did a study with this device and found that it was a 98% reduction in use in commercial kitchens. So great opportunity. And it's not just restaurants, right? It's schools, it's grocery stores, it's anywhere where they're thawing large amounts of food. Again, the California Water Efficiency Partnership has a direct distribution program. which reduces the price. It reduces it down to about $2,700 as opposed to the retail price is $3,800. So as a reminder, we do have our custom rebate. Any commercial kitchen could currently go out and buy this device and go through our custom rebate. The value of doing the direct distribution is just cheaper for the customer and a discount for us as well. It just kind of makes sense to help us promote it in a realistic way to help these commercial customers.
What does it actually do?
Yeah, so you fill up the basin and it moves the water up and through while keeping the water cool, right? So it's not, but also thawing the food, right?
Does it plug in?
It does plug in. Mhm.
So it has heaters.
It does. Yeah. And it rotates the water through, right? As opposed to thawing where it's just running on the top of whatever the water's hitting. Health, food, and safety, or the food and safety folks love it. They think it's a vast improvement over the current common practice. So
How big is it?
it's pretty big, right? It's meant to sit on the edge of a commercial drain.
Would it
sink.
hold a turkey?
It's as big as the sink. It does. You don't put it in the device. You put the food in the sink
I see.
and it snaps
It
on.
changes the water in the sink.
Exactly. It rotates the
gotcha.
water through, circulates the water through. Yeah. So I'm going to stop there. And those are the two new rebate programs. Just to see if there's any questions before I take a deep dive into TURF, because these are two new programs that staff is proposing that we move forward with, and see if there's any comments from the board.
Are-
No.
All good?
Sorry, Dinah.
No, I just thought that kitchen food defroster thing was so incredibly cool, and what an incredible savings. But I had never heard of it until I went through your slides yesterday.
Yeah, it's fairly new, only maybe 5 years or so old. So
Mhm.
fairly new device. Okay.
Carrie,
Next
when
question.
will you bring these back for consideration?
So because we already have the funds on deposit with CalWEP, there's no additional cost to the district. We would just sign up through CalWEP's direct distribution program and we can start immediately.
So is that something we could then agree upon now, or how
No,
does?
I think what Carrie's saying, and we did talk about it, because there's not a noted kind of additional expense for the district, sharing it, and then staff under the GM, we would just move it forward.
They're just going to do it.
Okay, all right.
And, in our wildest dreams, were it so successful that we we used all those funds that are currently on account with CalWEP, then of course we would be back to the board reporting our success and requesting additional funds for those programs.
Understood. Thank you.
Carrie, can I ask you a question? Just before you go into turf conversion, one of the things I didn't understand in that section was when people retained lawns, was there a certain amount they were retaining? If you could just, as you go through the slides, maybe say a little bit about, because that was a little confusing since I know that was the purpose of the program. So
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good reminder. All right, so let's take a deeper dive into a turf conversion program. So what we're going to talk about here is we're going to review the survey findings, discuss barriers to completing these turf conversion projects, and then look at some new programs that staff has developed. So in last fall, November or so, we discussed with the board our turf survey around program dropouts is what we called them. There were folks who signed up for the turf program and didn't complete their project. And we sent a survey to them to find out why they didn't complete their project. We didn't have a great response, only 25%, but we did feel like we had some good questions that we thought, well, we could kind of leverage what we asked them with our folks who completed their projects and find out if there's any, alignment with that, with those responses. We had a 51% response rate on our completed projects, which is impressive. So the areas where both of these groups align, so the dropouts and the completed projects, they were motivated to save water, of course, right? That's number one. They all said, yeah, sure, you're going to give us more money. We'd happily take more money, right? And the third one was that there was a need for irrigation and design assistance. And that directly relates to what we heard from Adrian around inspiration and motivation and, getting folks to want to make this change.
Do we still have the 1,000 square foot cap?
It is, I believe it's 2,000. I believe we increased it when we increased the rebate amount. But that's a great question. And
Is that enough?
yeah, you'll see when we talk about
Okay.
this. But yeah, we have very few folks who kind of bump up on the high end of that
Okay.
max. So some
I'm thinking about the tier fours is
Mhm.
where I'm headed is, if we're focused on them and if
Sure.
the sheer force I know, I don't think 2,000 square feet is going to cut it.
Sure. So some of the motivations that went beyond just saving water for folks who actually completed their project, it was beautification. It was how they utilized their landscape, right? It's improving their landscape, and they were appreciative of the rebate amount. So while they said, sure, give us more, they also recognized that the rebate did motivate them to take that action. So kind of interesting. Next one was they knew a lot of people who've already done these types of projects. So the social influence may play a larger role in pushing customers to complete these projects. We hear this when we hear Adrian talk about our customer success stories, right? Sharing what you're doing with your neighbors and being inspired. The third piece is that we actually asked these customers how much they paid for their landscape. And it was an optional response. We had 62 customers tell us what they paid for these landscape improvements, and we were able to link their responses to the rebate amount, to their address, and to our photos we had from before and after. So we took that information and then we broke these groups into 4 distinct categories based on the photos, kind of their pre and post photos, before we knew anything about their survey responses. We wanted to say, do we see any consistencies or anything that's interesting when we kind of separate these into smaller groups. So starting with a ranking of 1, this was 10 of the 62 projects. These are bare minimum projects, right? They basically sheet mulch, they took their lawn out, capped irrigation, very few plantings, and they did not reinstall irrigation. That's a very important feature. There's a lot of information on each of these next 4 slides, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but I wanted to capture it all for each of these groupings so that we have it for future reference. So just some of the highlights. Project cost was fairly low, and the rebate covered the majority of the project, right? So it was only $1,300 or so. You can see the project size. You can see who designed, installed, and maintained these very simple sites. How many of them had a really lush green lawn when they decided to participate? So it was only 33%, and 100% of these sites removed all the lawn on their property. Okay. And then we looked at water savings for these groups, and we found a 21% decrease in their average summer use. So all these folks were from, right, because they did the survey, they had participated in this program years ago. These were, about 2 years plus. So we have some good water savings calculations as well for this. So a ranking of 2 is they replaced the lawn, but they also installed some significant new plantings along with irrigation to support those new plantings. So the cost is creeping up. We're at about $5,000. The square footage is about the same for both 1, 2, and 3, interestingly enough. Homeowners do a lot of the design work, but they're, starting to hire folks to do the installation, and homeowners are doing the maintenance as well. Increase in how healthy how many of them have really healthy lawns. And then we're starting to see some of these sites keep the lawn. And by retaining the lawn, what I mean is staff's on site, they look and they say, okay, you took out all the lawn in your front yard, but your backyard still has a bunch of lawn in it. So how many of them actually are keeping some lawn on site? And we're starting to see the water savings really close, but a slight increase. Looking at a ranking of 3, these are sites that where folks are saying things like, I don't think I could do it by myself. They're getting help. They replace the lawn. They have some significant other features like hardscape or pavers where they needed help to do the installation. We're at about $9,000 for the project cost. Similar project size, I didn't call out, but the challenges for each of these groups are also in the call out box. And we're also seeing with each one of these, the amount of lawn they're keeping on site is slightly increasing as well. And so, as is the percent of healthy lawns that are being replaced, and the water savings are going up. So, some interesting stats there. And then finally, ranking of 4. These are the fancy projects. Average cost is $113,000. Are rebates paying less than 1%? Likely not a motivator for them, right? But maybe some of our materials inspired them to do something different with their landscape. Most of these are professionally designed and installed and maintained. 50% of them had really healthy lawns, and 25% retain lawn on site. And then our water savings is the highest with this group. And so some of the key observations, there's a significant range in cost. And we know this, right? We think about, some people are really inspired to have a beautiful yard, and some are just like, sheet mulch it and be done. So in some cases, our rebates paying all of 100% of the project cost. Second interesting observation is that homeowners are the primary designers across the board. Even if they're hiring an outside consultant or designer, they're the ones providing the inspiration to what they want that site to look like. And that's why it's important that we have some good imagery and, you know, some good motivations for folks to kind of build off what they want that new landscape to provide for them. Installations commonly hired out, except for the very simple sites, which are like the DIY sites. All of these customers said that it was worth the investment. And you think about that because that's a great, you know, something that Adrian can use to talk about, you know, the value add for doing a project like this. The more complex the project, the higher amount of turf that was retained on site. So we go to a site and there's 1,000 square feet and they're going to take out 800 of it and they're going to keep 200 square feet as part of this project. We're not going to pay them for that 200 square feet, but it's, you know, we're not going to tell them they can't put that 200 square feet back in. And so in some cases, they're actually installing new lawn as part of this project, but taking out a significant amount of it. And so that's what we mean by, you know, areas that were retained. Alternatively, we'll have some sites that, you know, again, take out the front yard, but not the back, right? So that's how we're capturing, you know, is there any lawn being retained? We think it's really interesting that of course, the sites that have the healthy irrigated lawn have the highest water savings, highest potential for water savings, but they also are the ones that are keeping the most turf, right? So we have some action items from these key observations and from this survey. One is that we are going to continue to rate these installations, but now we're doing it as part of our post-inspection when we're at the site, and we're asking customers to share with us the cost there when it's in the moment, so they're not thinking back 2 years, gosh, how much did I pay for this? You know, it's a little bit more accurate. And if they don't want to share it, they certainly don't have to. But this will provide for additional detailed analysis around, you know, potential water savings and what we're seeing long term. We want to remove some of the barriers, right? The assistance is needed to find inspiration and contractors. And we know this, we can kind of leverage some of the things that Adrian was saying around, you know, even we struggle with finding great photos. And so, you know, we can understand that they want to get some assistance there as well. And finally, ensuring that any turf that's retained on the site is irrigated efficiently, right? If someone's installing lawn back as part of their project, we want it to be irrigated as efficiently as possible. So the two new programs that we're proposing.
Terry, sorry,
Yep,
before
yep.
you move on, just
Sure.
really, really interesting information that's coming out of the surveys. One, although the price goes up a lot, and that makes sense as the complexity of the project increases, our rebate amounts seem pretty consistent across the 4 rankings.
No, it
no?
started off at like 80% plus, and it went down to 1%.
Meaning the amount.
The
that we-
amount compared to the cost. Oh, but our overall rebate amount, yes.
Our actual
yes,
amount
The actual amount, yeah. So
is
like the
very
1,000
consistent.
average amount, yeah, is about 1,000 per post.
Is that why is that? Is that because the amount of turf that's being replaced still remains consistent despite the complexity of the project?
Average project size is about 700 to 800 square feet. So it's the same amount, whether it costs you 100,000 to replace that 800 square feet, or if it costs you $1,000 to replace that 800 square feet. So our rebate amounts would be the same. Right.
That's interesting. I'm not, so we're not, although the ranking number 4, again, so much more is being spent. That's not all just straightforward turf replacement. It's all the other additions that are
they're
being done.
creating
to
a
the
living
land.
space or creating, some outdoor space that's much more complex than just a turf replacement project.
Is that picture typical of the 113? They just pour concrete?
Yeah, there's concrete, there's pavers, there's,
Zero use water,
yeah,
basically.
exactly. Yeah.
Can you tell us where the projects are, roughly in what district they fall?
For each ranking, I don't have that stat with me, but we certainly could. And we're talking about 13 projects, right? So I think as the data set grows, I think it'll be more meaningful. But you can imagine probably where most of these larger projects were
Yeah, I'm
install.
just curious if they're more in Tiburon or more in Ross. So,
Yeah, maybe later as we accumulate more data, Carrie, it'd be interesting to see the proportion of larger turf replacements versus small, like what percentage of our rebates are going to really big replacement projects versus what seems to be, in this case, among these 13, sort of very similar levels of turf replacement.
Yeah, the average for most of these projects is about the same.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The average size. Okay, we're so close. In response to the need, we want to develop a vendor list for both design and installation. We'll have minimum qualifications and we'll post this list online. It allows for customers to see some suggestions on either design services, installation services, and or firms that match customers with these types of services. Of course, we're not guaranteeing any work. The vendor would actually hold the contract with the customer and be the customer's due diligence to interview them and decide which ones they want. But it's really just kind of narrow the field and point them in the right direction. And it's a great opportunity when we're talking about the marketing piece around planning. Here's a list you can use to help you plan. We do this for other items with other projects within the district, like backflow, for example. We have a vendor list to help point people in the right direction. It's really common amongst other water utilities. Contra Costa has been doing it for years, as well as East Bay Bud. So we want to give that a go and see if that helps remove any of those barriers. The other project the other program we're proposing is a streamlined irrigation equipment program, right? Recognizing that 15% of these turf replacement program participants are keeping lawn. And so we want to make sure if they've gone through this whole project and they've reinstalled lawn, us motivating them to take that lawn out is highly unlikely. So how can we ensure that they're irrigating that area as efficiently as possible? And then you think about all the dropouts from our program, right? They're obviously keeping their lawn. And so again, we want to make sure that those sites are maximizing the efficiency. And we know that high efficiency sprinkler nozzles can provide a significant amount of water savings, up to 20%. The other irrigation equipment would be a drip conversion kit. A lot of times we see out in the field where there's overhead spray when it should be drip. So a starter kit, helping folks convert that as overhead spray to drip, allowing them to kind of take that first step. So what we're proposing here is a pilot program with $10,000. We would do this in coordination with a local hardware distributor, and we'd establish standardized pricing, and we'd have approved list of hardware. The district would contribute up to $200 per customer, and the customer would have a cost share. So, for every sprinkler nozzle they're replacing, they're paying 50% and we're paying 50%, for example. The items that they would be pre-qualified for would be based on what we see at a cap. So we would know exactly what they should be getting. And with $10,000, it gives us an opportunity to pilot with 50 customers. We can do the analysis and see, does it make sense? Is this effective? Are we getting participation? Are we seeing water savings, et cetera? So those are the two new kind of turf-focused programs that staff has developed. I'm just going to wrap up here with next steps, and we can chat about any of these items. So establishing the direct distribution for Moen and the food defroster, creating this vendor list, as I mentioned, initiating this irrigation equipment program. And then we have a number of follow-up topics I've mentioned today, one of which is our high water users and customer sector analysis, which we'll bring back to the board for discussion. And then also we have our end of year closeout, looking at water savings and program participation, amongst other things, school ed, water loss, et cetera. So I just did the two most kind of ones that are teed up for right now. So with that, any questions, happy to take them.
Diana?
No, thank you. It's really inspirational to see just how on top of it you are, and how you're constantly looking for new ideas and new ways to save.
Carrie, thank you for and Adrian for the really good update. You started out by reminding us that this is all framed within a master plan, and we talked about the development of that plan, and there are a lot of activities within the plan that we'll continue to take forward. But I'm curious, as you start to collect more information from customers, layer that on, years of experience with water efficiency improvement. Kind of what is your feeling on or sort of like kind of almost, like what is your feeling on the most effective elements of the master plan, that the areas that you think will have the largest bang for the buck, be most cost effective?
AMI.
Interesting.
I mean, it's important that we incentivize our customers and work with them and inspire them to make these changes. But there's nothing like having access to the real-time data to motivate them to say, wow, this is why I need to make this change, and for them to appreciate the value that they'll see that's specific to them. It's one thing for us to say on average, it's a 20% savings, right? But in some cases, it might be a 50% savings. And having that additional data is going to be key.
I mean, I'll tell you, so I see the GPCD numbers that you cite now, what targets are, how we relate, how we compare to other water users. And then I go back and I've heard even, Larry, others kind of reflect on how our personal amounts compare to those numbers. And that's still what I monitor with my all the, the Flume and the Eye on the Sky apps. I always check to see where we are with the GPCD, and as if it stays within that range, then I'm generally comfortable. So if it went well beyond that, I would start to ask questions. What have we done? What are we doing differently? So that real-time data is very important for myself in water management. So interesting. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Is there a way to integrate this program with the Zone 0 no embers generation? I don't know if it's a significant chunk of water, but it seems to me there's a way of tying these together. I'm thinking about my own yard. We have a fair number of plants within that 5 feet. But probably, we don't irrigate the grass. So, our water demand outside is pretty minimal. But I'm wondering if there's a way to integrate those two together to incentivize folks to clear out the 5 foot. I know Moraga is pushing pretty hard. My son has just chopped down a bunch of junipers, big ones, like 40 foot tall and 6-inch diameter trunks.
We did that as well, Larry, because of the MWPA audit. So we took out all the junipers.
Yeah, there's no pressure where I am at all from Tiburon because, we're basically out of the burn zone,
Yes.
and surrounded by water. So, we don't have really much issue. But that doesn't mean we're not interested. I just wonder if there's a way to integrate those two programs together and incentivize them. Also, I thought your answer about AMI, I agree with you. As you probably remember or know, I'm a pretty strong supporter of AMI for exactly the reasons you talk about. I think that the concept of expecting someone to respond to something that's 60 days out of date, one, is kind of useless. So what are you going to do about it? And two, not having that real time, it is a big disadvantage. But what surprised me in your answer was Flume. I would think that Flume would fill that gap, and apparently you don't feel it does, or it's not.
I changed my Flume battery yesterday. I
Yeah.
do it every 9 months. I mean, most people aren't willing to do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a
Yeah.
challenge.
Do you think that's why most of them go out?
Yeah, I think they do. I think that, and then they'll re-engage when they realize they have a leak and they missed it because they haven't changed their battery, right? So it's very cyclical, but doesn't provide the immediate benefit.
Does it tell you?
It tells you when your battery's dying. Yeah.
And so that's probably the explanation why, what is it, 2/3 are disconnected?
Yeah, it's 1/3.
1/3.
Right. On average, but we're constantly getting new Flume customers and some are constantly dropping off and then they'll re-engage, right? It's just,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just ebb and flow of,
Yeah, I was hopeful that it was a more related to the internet, not to some physical issue. Is there a way that we could tickle those folks? I mean, I suppose they're saying they don't care about the results, huh? It doesn't matter to them, which I do understand because your comments are correct, but you also stop depending on it, because it flat lines.
Yeah, I mean, I've said it, you start to see you understand your trend.
Yeah.
And then you become comfortable if the trend
Yeah.
remains, it's just consistent.
Yeah. The problem is, of course, when it changes without your knowledge. And then if you don't have access to the knowledge, you don't know about it until the end. And then it's catastrophic potentially. Okay, well, that was very interesting. And thank you very much.
thank you.
Public comment?
Yes, Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Thanks for addressing demand management in the planning committee. It's good that resources are being put into programs designed to reduce the wasteful use of potable water on summer landscaping. What's puzzling, though, is that in spite of these improved programs, our year-over-year usage continues to increase by about 10% ever since the 2021 drought. Last week, it was up 13%, and as you would expect, our reservoirs are 2% lower than they were at this time last year. The good news is that before the drought, our 2020 system-wide per capita use was 127 gallons per day, and in 2023, it was only 103 gallons per day. It's interesting, if I understood Carrie's comments, that's also our 2045 goal. So it sounds like we may be marking time for the next 20 years, but I may have misunderstood the comments.
I don't think that was implied. I didn't hear that, Phil.
Okay, I thought it was 103.
No, your numbers are right.
Okay.
But I didn't hear that we're going to mark time.
It's just that 103 is the target for 2045.
Right, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But not necessarily a critical one way or the other.
Okay. Okay. We did get some fresh data last week when we saw residential sales by tier, and those numbers show residential uses going up by less than 5% a year. And that leads to an important question. If system-wide use is increasing by 10% annually, while residential use is increasing by only 5% annually, what makes up the difference? We have some 2023 numbers that show commercial users make up 11% of total demand, institutional makes up 7%, and irrigation users make up 3%. Could these non-residential users account for our annual demand increasing by 10% rather than 5%? And I think Carrie said those users might be up 15%, so that's a good area to look at. The only other recent data I've been able to find are the monthly per capita usage numbers that staff provides to the California State Water Resources Control Board. Those data show in 2020, before the drought, residential customers were using 60 gallons per day in the winter and 125 gallons per day in the summer. After the drought, winter use dropped to 50 gallons per day and summer use dropped to 90 gallons per day. Since then, winter use has stayed at 50 gallons per day while the summer use has crept back up to 105 gallons per day. Over the past 2 years, we've learned that Marin Water has a large portfolio of options to bring supply and demand into balance. Some options cost a lot, while some cost much less. Some options require bringing in lower quality water from outside, while others let us rely on our own watershed. And some options require seizing of private land, while other options don't. These major decisions can make life better or worse for district customers. In making these decisions, I'll request diving deeper into the data we have and updating the 2023 information that's on the public website and bringing the public up to current with where staff is today. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much. And let's move on to AMI.
Okay, switching gears slightly. We've talked a lot about water efficiency and the behavioral aspects associated with that. And we're here, last time we presented on AMI, we heard an interest from the board to understand again the sort of business case behind AMI. And so we're going to dive into some of those details here, and Craig's got a presentation for us this morning.
All right, Craig Lauritsen, AMI Program Manager. Glad to be back with another update on AMI. So I'll start out with a review of a few slides from last month's May planning meeting involving approaches to implementation and key considerations. And then I'll move into those key project drivers that Paul mentioned, potential water savings, project cost comparisons, and enhanced customer engagement and communication. And then I'll list some other AMI benefits and then finish with next steps. So reviewing from last month, the RFP will facilitate a few different types of proposals from vendors, including the turnkey, which is where a single vendor can propose a complete AMI solution that will include design, equipment, and installation. And then the traditional installation, so we'd have two separate contracts, one for equipment, one for an installation contractor. And then that third district installed approach would be a contract with a vendor and then hiring in-house staff to do the installs. And then during the last update, we also looked at antenna versus cellular. And that's the antenna system relies on the fixed network of antenna installed on district assets, which can be challenging when there's tanks in close proximity to customer properties, especially depending on the height requirements of those antenna. And then cellular relies on the existing cellular infrastructure. And then some vendors offer a hybrid solution, which is predominantly antenna with cellular as fill-in. So moving on to the key project drivers, starting with potential water savings. The first bullet there, the lack of comparable data to assess water savings. Now, there's quite a few AMI projects existing in California and around the country, but it's really hard to take another utility's water savings and apply it to Marin Water because every utility is unique, as far as the local water supply conditions, the water efficiency, messaging and programs, the cost of water, the billing structure. It's hard to tease out and say, okay, this is what to expect from, AMI water savings. So there are some percentages we can look at, starting with our own Marin Water Badger pilot. So I have two percentages there, the 3.4% and the 7.3%. I'll start with the 3.4. That looked at about 4,000 single-family residential AMI customers that were upgraded between 2018 and 2022. And we compared those 4,000 AMI customers, all single-family, to all the other single-family customers that don't have AMI, which is about 48,000 customers. We looked at 2017 use for those two groups when no one had AMI, and then we looked at 2023 use, which hops over the drought, to see where use was for AMI versus not AMI. And there was water savings on average across the board, but those AMI customers saved an additional 3.4%. Then I started thinking, do those 4,000 single-family customers really represent our average or typical customer? Because for that larger sample size, a lot of those are dense clusters of AMI customers in Belvedere and Tiburon or in pockets of San Rafael. So there's still large areas with zero AMI or very little, especially residential AMI. So we thought, well, let's look at a side-by-side comparison, smaller sample size, but it eliminates some of the variables. So the image there to the right is actually not too far from here. And there's two clusters of symbols, and those make up 2 meter reading routes. So our district's made up of over 360 meter reading routes. And the symbols in green were upgraded to AMI in 2020, and the symbols in blue have no AMI. So both of those routes are over 200 meters. And again, we looked at 2017 when no AMI was in the ground, and then looked at 2023 post-drought. And the route with AMI, again, both routes experience water reduction, but the AMI route experienced an additional 7.3%. So, you know, that range of the 3.4 for the larger sample size versus the 7.3, we feel that we're going to end up somewhere in between with water savings due to AMI. Now, that could be expanded out, like what Carrie was touching on, that data could be used to help support other programs and evaluate other programs. But just, you know, crediting AMI by itself, we're looking at about 5% potential water savings. So that's our in-house data. We also have data kind of industry. Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to make sure I follow. So the 3.4% reduction comes from the larger sample size of AMI customers compared against our district, the non-AMI customers.
Right, all single family.
All single family. And then the 7.3% savings was determined when you did sort of this controlled comparison in a very discrete area.
Right, with similar parcel sizes, same microclimate. So really a nice side by side. You're not taking data from one part of a service area and comparing it to data at the other corner of a service area, which was that global side by side, or that global comparison. So this was just to zoom in on, you know, to eliminate some of the variables.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So AWWA, their member case studies have shown a pretty wide range of savings from 3% to 15%. In some cases, they're literally going from unmetered to full AMI, so you can expect a pretty big savings there. And then EPA WaterSense, their data is a little tighter with AMI paired with a customer portal at 5 to 10%. So for what it's worth, you know, our in-house analysis does overlap with those ranges, you know, across the industry. So at this point, we're assuming that 5% would be likely for us. So that's looking at potential water savings. Next, we're going to look at capital and life cycle costs. This slide was also presented last month, but the next couple slides kind of marry the water savings and the costs. So I wanted to touch on this briefly. So we have the top row, turnkey versus traditional in-house, and that turnkey is that white glove, you know, project. And then the second row down, antenna versus cellular, you see the antenna has the higher upfront equipment cost, tax and contingencies, pretty similar across the board. And then the installation is higher for the antenna, or sorry, the installation is higher for the turnkey project. So those project components add up to the capital cost row. So that's what it costs to get the system in the ground. And then that bottom row is the capital cost plus the 18 years to maintain the system, is that 18-year life cycle cost. So I'm using this slide to set up the next couple regarding, you know, cost of the project, because that there's a relationship between that cost and potential water savings. So this graph was a lot of fun to assemble. I always like or appreciate graphs that take a few different variables and see where they intersect. I'll do my best to walk through it here. So this was more of a thought experiment, and you know, the goal of the graph was to help answer a question that, you know, is there a scenario where water savings alone would justify the cost of an AMI system? So I'll start with the bullet point of, were we to save 8% of total potable demand annually, the water savings relative to the cost of Sonoma water supports the cost of AMI. So a bit to unpack there, but I'll walk through the graph, starting with the y-axis of the life cycle cost of AMI and present value. That's that, it's a bit faded there, but there's a yellow bar that passes through the horizontally. That's that, you know, near or approaching $40 million life cycle cost. And then the bottom, across the bottom on the x-axis, is the potential water savings ranging from 1 to 12%. The top of the graph has some of our data on water savings. Okay. The top of the graph has that is bracketed Marin water savings in green, which we've seen at that 3.5 to 7.3%. And then the AWE is the Alliance for Water Efficiency of 5 to 10%. And then the two lines that run up at an angle, that orange one is the cost of Sonoma water, which has that higher, imported water cost. And then the blue line is our blended or average cost of water. So at that 8% mark, you can see a dotted line running up the middle there. That's where everything intersects, where, based on that higher Sonoma water price, achieving that 8% savings in, essentially avoided cost would justify that life cycle cost, or at least support the life cycle cost of an AMI system. But our own in-house data has shown that 8% is likely out of reach. But fortunately, there's several other reasons to do AMI, right? We're not only doing AMI to try to break even on, this, as like a new water source project. This is just one of the project drivers is water savings, and we're going to end up somewhere on this graph. And it's just encouraging to know that there will be a level of, supporting the project cost due to water savings.
Craig, do the Sonoma water costs, and I guess our costs, our average costs as well, do they include annual inflation?
This would be under current pricing. So everything, the life cycle cost is present value. And even though that 1750 is stated there, that also factors in, it does factor in inflation over time.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay. So the amount so if we're calculating this over the 18-year life cycle cost that you showed earlier.
Right. Of that.
And that gives the number for the AMI costs of, that's the yellow bar that's going horizontally across the graph. So
Right, that's the present value.
So this, Craig, is it fair to say this is an illustration of sort of the return on the investment, with the understanding that with our minimum take or pay, we may not actually realize that savings, but it still represents the value of the water that's saved. And there are offsets, of course, with big capital projects. It's just the annual cost, I don't know, will get the return the way it's presented, but I think it's still a powerful illustration.
And I would say we don't often look at many projects like this in this way. As a public agency, it's the return on investment is not, generally speaking, a criteria for the public works process. Otherwise, they'd be private process, right? Projects. So this was just a creative way for us to think about the project in terms of its value. And of course, we've got other ways in which we've considered and looked at this project to align with how we've looked at some of the other water supply options.
It's a little complicated too. I'm thinking about your comment. The take or pay is offset by not treating the water. So it's a little tricky, as you know. I guess what you're thinking is it's going to be spilled. That's where you're headed, is that it doesn't really matter. We're buying the water, and then via the reservoir, we're spilling it. So we don't, whether we treat it or don't treat it, it has an effect. But the real impact is that everything we buy, we throw out via the spill. I think that's where you're headed. Like I say, it's a little tricky.
And that was sort of how we looked at the other water supply project, wasn't it, over the 100-year period? And we were like, well, okay, we're going to spill. So every year we have this supply, it's spilling. So we've done the same comparison for us here. So that's coming up next, I think.
Yep. Yeah. So the next slide does that. This table was presented back. Alliance for Water Efficiency. So they had a slightly higher savings range than our in-house. Yeah. So this table was presented to the board December of last year, looking at water supply alternatives, and the only change has been the AMI has been added to the bottom of it. So AMI assumptions were plugged into this pretty robust, powerful spreadsheet that looked at all these projects. And some of the assumptions are the 22,000 acre feet of potable use. There's the 5% annual water savings. That's likely to come from AMI, and then the 18-year life cycle. So again, this just stacks these projects with AMI in there and looks at that 100-year time horizon. And naturally, you know, an 18-year life cycle, that's multiple AMI projects over the 100 years, and only focusing on dry year benefits or dry year yields. But you can see it compares pretty favorably to almost all of those other projects. And like ARC, fourth from the bottom, the atmospheric river capture projects on there. So even though the yield is smaller from that 5% savings, the cost is also lower, and which works out to the average dry year acre feet cost being pretty, you know, competitive with those other projects up there. So looking at this, you know, one would say that AMI is you know, stacks up pretty favorably to these other projects.
I think it's even more interesting than that. Like most water reduction things, whether it's recycled water or whatever, you spend the money once, and then it benefits for its life. And I'm not even sure exactly what you're defining as life of it, how you arrived at that. I don't know. I can't envision anything that wears out. My AMI sure had no maintenance. It's the batteries.
Yeah.
Right. But that doesn't wear it out. That's not a life cycle thing. That's just maintenance. It's not dead when the battery's dead. You just, well, it depends, I guess, on the head.
Exactly. Yeah, but if it's a digital meter that's reliant on a battery, which not all are, some of them have a little solar panel, then it's a paperweight once that battery dies. And same with that endpoint.
Not necessarily. We actually went in, we own a couple of them from business, and we went in and got the battery out. It replaced it. So it's doable. It causes you to violate the water tightness of the installation, but it was not complicated. It was just, my thinking, I hate things like that, that designed for replacement, as opposed to just replacement of the battery.
What folks are finding, and we'll probably be in the same place for the next kind of couple replacement cycles, that the technology advancements are happening so rapid that it makes sense to replace it because you're getting so many other features.
Although I have to feel that's kind of like the curve you're talking about, that levels out.
Right.
You know, like
Yes.
you can only reduce the battery demand so much, right? If it's going to do anything, you might maybe even a 10-fold increase. I don't think the battery is going to last 10 times longer because you're using 1/10 that amp drop.
Right.
It's just the battery has its own life. You know, it was funny flying into Toronto for the AWA meeting a few years ago. I might have mentioned this before, I probably did, that my seatmate on the airplane was battery company. I was shocked that they now see the AWA as a place to sell their product. Unique, you know, they don't even see it as the vendors of the meters, but as it's worth going to AWA to hawk their product to the users. Now, maybe they're trying to sway people to say, if you use XYZ battery, you get more life or something. I don't know. I don't know what their thinking was. I didn't probe into that why. But it was a shock to me, very frankly. I've never seen anything like that. From this year's meeting, the one thing I observed was I thought the display area was pretty small. I cruised it in 2 hours. It normally takes me more like a day to make the loop. Part of the reason was I saw split between heavy equipment and electronics. There was a clear dichotomy in the vendors. I think maybe more on the software electronic side than on the heavy equipment side, you know, the classical stuff of PlayVal and those kind of people and Dor Oliver or whoever now owned by.
Yeah.
That kind of, you know, clarifiers versus stuff to do stuff with. One of the people that approached me was a vendor for lab data management. I went, you know, that just didn't seem like a logical thing to me to be pushing people to switch that kind of thing because, you know, why would they care about that? Most people.
Yeah. Well, were the technology or battery life to improve, these numbers would look a little better. So
And that I think is a good bet. It will improve. The problem is this is the beta testing, you know.
Yeah.
The problem always is the same. If you talk to anybody in Silicon Valley about software manufacturers in particular, the bosses will finally say, we're going with this one. Because sure, it will always be better if you wait. The problem is you don't know when, you don't know if, and you don't know how much it's going to cost to get there. They say, let's get some cash flow, let's get it out there, and then go for, I mean, I think Microsoft does a pretty good job of that. You know, they understand the repeatability of the market, Apple too, in the way they move the phones. You know, they run them until you get tired of them, or they eventually you're tired of them. You know, change. So there's a lot of things going on in that market.
yeah, for now, this is the numbers we've got. It looks pretty good. I would say comparable, as Craig said, to some of the other water supply projects that we are engaging with. So,
Paul, just to follow on that point, the cost for dry year yield,
yes,
an acre foot for AMI is much less than what was previously estimated for conservation as a whole. Our cost for dry year yields for the conservation program were higher, quite a bit higher. And so I'm assuming well, I think it's because the cost effectiveness of AMI, and which reflects what Carrie said earlier, is higher. Our estimates of cost effectiveness for AMI are higher than some of the other conservation measures that we're including in our overall effort master plan.
Yeah, at the same time, we probably have stronger historical data on other conservation measures. This, I think, it's somewhat conservative, appropriately, the 5%. I'd say for me personally, the question is the sustainability of those savings, meaning if you look 2 years out, maybe folks are still engaged in the AMI system and reading it, and has it tailed off to where we just don't know. And it's, you know, price sensitive. So if we're at 3% instead of 5%, on the other hand, that's probably offset with the earlier discussion of battery life that most likely is going to be extended. So I think this is a pretty solid kind of reference point.
Okay, so we looked at the water savings and the cost, and then we're going to move on to another key project driver, enhanced customer engagement and communication. So these next couple slides are more soft costs related to AMI. That first one, I'll touch on the improved customer experience and call quality due to interval data. Right now, a common call to customer service is my bill is higher than normal or my use is higher than last year. And it's the customer service reps are doing the best they can with, you know, kind of trying to troubleshoot or speculate. But, you know, maybe it's a leak, maybe it's indoor, maybe it's outdoor. Have you changed your irrigation schedule, new landscaping, plumbers, you know, construct, you know, you're just asking questions and the customer is trying to remember what they did 4, 6, 7 weeks ago. And sometimes those calls lead to a customer service field inspector going out to take another read or to check for meter movement, or they get transferred to water efficiency to talk about a cap audit or a phone consultation. And most of it's due to lack of data. You just have these 2-month intervals. So, fast forward to AMI, the customer calls and the customer service rep is able to pull up that billing period and say, look, there was a 10-day leak and this is the volume, or that looks like you have a spike in use every morning, 7 days a week. It's, looks like an irrigation schedule. And then teach the customer to fish and say, hey, you have access to the same graph that I'm looking at, and you can get automated, leak and high use alerts. So it just, that, it'll be a conversation more about data than versus kind of a guessing game of why the water use is higher than the customer thinks it should be.
Think about that Moen valve. That concerned me a little bit
Mhm.
because it's an approach, but it's kind of not a lot of brains
Mhm.
in it, right? Are you sure, even if you have a leak, you want your water shut off?
Right. Yeah, I've heard some cases of false alarms where, the irrigation's running and the laundry, like 3 things are going on at once. So it assumes a catastrophic leak, and so there's a little bit of, teaching involved to the software. I mean, it is pretty powerful to be able to remotely shut off your plumbing, especially if there is a catastrophic leak.
One of the brands of AMI has a valve like that at the end of in the meter box.
Mm-hmm.
So that it can get a signal that says, okay, shut them off.
Right.
But is that an automated response to what it's measuring, or is that something that you have to, tell it to shut off?
Both. Either.
Yeah.
I know it can receive commands from the water district
Mm-hmm.
to terminate,
Right.
close
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
Now, there are a variety of reasons you might do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So some of them do have integrated valve as part of that lay length of the meter. And I've even talked to one utility where they had it where the customer could also, through their app, they could also shut it off through the same valve. Yeah, a noticeable cost increase, in some cases doubling the cost of the meter when that valve is integrated. But I do have some research on which vendors offer those valves. And I guess another drawback is most of them, it's like 5/8 and 3/4, but 1 inch and larger, there's no valve involved, which would eliminate, a fair amount of our meters.
One of the things I noticed heavy duty at the AWWA was Camstruck.
Mm.
They were there in force.
Yeah.
The Danish government is obviously helping them a lot. They had a booth equal to any of them, which for a company that kind of didn't exist
Mhm.
10 years ago, kind of interesting. They're in there with the really big guys, that size booth, 100 grand plus
Mm.
type booth.
Mhm.
They're obviously in for the.
Right.
for the
Yeah.
game.
Yeah, they're definitely one of the big players right now in AMI. So in addition to improved call quality, that kind of goes along with the next 2 bullet points. The portals show use in near real time, the automated leak and high use alerts, and then that last bullet, targeted outreach and messaging during drought. AMI is going to be a really useful tool during the next drought, whether it's those automated alerts or empowering the customers to deal with leaks in a timely manner, or to find out that their usage is, trending up instead of down during the drought. A tremendous amount of resources were used during the last drought, and a lot of it was because of the lack of data that we will have in the future.
You probably don't recall, but during the 76 drought, we actually installed restrictors on certain folks that they were told you've got to reduce your water. If you don't, we're going to restrict it.
I mean, there was mandatory rationing, right? 35
Mandatory
gallons
rationing, yes.
per customer per
Yes.
day.
But more than that, there was also enforcement. If you didn't comply, then they put on part of the reason that Ben has a bulletproof glass in his office.
Right. Yeah. Hopefully the AMI would be more of the education and outreach side of the, drought response. So a couple slides left, additional AMI benefits. This is under operational efficiency, fewer truck rolls for, billing reads, move in, move outs, verifies, and fewer truck rolls lead to reduced fuel consumption, vehicle maintenance, greenhouse gas emissions, streamlined billing and customer service processes, AMI can more quickly identify under registering or stuck meters versus those bi-monthly reads. AMI can detect backflow conditions, and the granular data enables better system diagnostics and demand forecasting. So it can actually help on the district side as well.
It appears to me from inside information that I have that the trend is definitely going to these electronic meters. So I don't think stuck meters are going to be an issue too much longer. I don't think the positive displacement meters are kind of where passing their time. It's going to these electronic devices. It fascinates me on a project we're currently working on, major player, and they are about 50-50. They have a foundry and they are electronic engineers. It's quite fascinating. I mean, it's even shocking, frankly. It's exactly the opposite of what you'd expect from the trend. Maybe it follows my observation at the AWWA that it's half and half software and electronics versus hardware.
Right. Well, our RFP definitely specifies pricing on both the ultrasonic, no moving part, and the positive displacement, so we can get a side-by-side comparison on price. So the summary from this presentation, reasonable water savings expectations of AMI is around 5%. The AMI project compares favorably to other water supply alternatives, and there will be enhanced customer engagement and communication along with those operational efficiencies. And next steps, release of the RFP in fall of 2025. We'll return to the board for a workshop and approval for the AMI implementation contract in either late 2025 or early 2026. And then the selected vendor will do a proof of concept with them in the spring of 2026, and then full deployment after that in summer of 2026.
What is proof of concept?
So we'll ask, and this is also specified in the RFP, of around 400 meters to be installed from the selected vendor to really test communication from the meter to the cloud to SAP, billing, customer portal. So to test on a small scale and also test the
pilot, basically.
Yeah. So that will give us confidence for full deployment.
And what are the metrics to determine if it's successful or not? Subjective?
Yeah, I mean, we want 97, 98% communication. We would probably, pick a couple different routes in different areas, and, it needs to go from meter to billing and to customer portal. And until that line of communication is consistent, then we would have to get that right before full deployment starts.
I find it interesting that we still have no cell phone where I live.
Mm-hmm.
We have to use the internet to make the cell phone work. And yet my AMI, as far as I know, is doing fine.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe the carrier signals are stronger than the voice signals. I don't know.
Yeah, it is pretty small data packets. You can be barely hanging on with 1 bar of cell service, and those
That's what we
cellular
have, 1
endpoints,
bar.
Yeah, is just enough to send that little data packet out. Yeah.
And I suppose the other thing is it can wait. It can try again.
Yeah.
If it didn't succeed, it says, okay, I'll try now.
Right. And it can store, I think it's 45 or 60 days of a backlog. So if it does continue to fail, eventually it'll catch up. Yeah.
Well, it's fascinating. I'm wondering, and I'm glad Carrie's still here, if we should have some kind of add on to the budget of, say, a 5% additional that we plow into conservation along with it. Burden the AMI project because the wallet's open, and maybe now's the time to really push the conservation side with it. I don't know, something to think about, because it's an additional 5%. It's not very much when you're spending 30 million or 25 million or whatever we're going to spend. But I am 150% behind you on this. So,
Thank you.
Diana?
Couple of quick questions on the slide. So we're still deciding, like on slide 3 with the turnkey and traditional installation, district install, we're still deciding which of those 3 we're going to go with. Is that right? Or we'll have proposals with different elements of those to kind of compare costs and versus time and energy of using our own resources, that kind of thing.
I could take a stab at that. Yes, you're right. We wanted to go through the RFP process so that we could bring the actual answers to the board rather than you see a lot of our costs, for example, or estimates. In a competitive bidding environment, those numbers could change. When you have the actual information in front of you regarding the costs for turnkey, the cost for antenna and cellular, and the sort of efficacy of an antenna versus cellular and what the specific challenges might be, we would hear directly from the vendors in that RFP process. So it'll really help us rather than sort of speculating now. We could truncate those decisions, but they might not be as well informed as they would be after the RFP.
Great. And then on slide 4, the antenna versus cellular, and the antenna, I'm assuming those are pre-existing antenna too, even though it says like the cellular relying on existing cellular infrastructure, but the installed fixed network of antenna, are those pre-existing?
Right now, there's 0 of them. We have antenna for our SCADA communication, but for AMI, it would be 100% new infrastructure.
Because I noticed when I looked at the costs that a lot of times the cellular costs were higher, and I would think it would be the reverse if we're relying on existing infrastructure as opposed to creating new infrastructure.
Yeah, so the upfront cost is lower for cellular because there's already cell towers, in our service area. There's no new infrastructure that needs to be added, but during the life cycle, that pivots to the cellular being more expensive because
that's what I figured.
Ongoing
Okay.
cellular fees. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, great. And then I just had one more. Nope, I think that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Craig, Paul. Craig, I think, in previous updates on the AMI, you've spent more time going through the comparisons of the different technologies, Cibeca offering the Amazon Sidewalk. Was it Camstrup that also allowed for leak detection?
Yes.
You didn't really, focus on those on that side, the sort of the technical comparisons today. I think as you're putting together the RFP, it would be helpful to understand how the pilot efforts so far or the evaluations of the different technologies are going to inform the RFP, what you pulled out of those evaluations that you would like to prioritize or deprioritize within the RFP. I guess basically just kind of like a summary of what we learned through the different evaluations.
Definitely. Yeah. That acoustic leak detection pilot that involves Camstrup and Mueller and possibly even a third one. There will be a separate update just on those. And that does overlap with AMI, where the Mueller hydrant loggers is not AMI, but there's still that benefit of this, acoustic leak detection. So that will receive its own update, and the RFP itself does ask for details from any vendor on their acoustic leak detection, abilities and other functionality like pressure and temperature and different sensors.
So as we're thinking and still are about the RFP, kind of generally 2 approaches. One would be kind of through this exercise, be narrowing down and tailoring the specifications, and maybe we'd conclude here, towers are just going to be brutal. We're going to go with cell and that kind of thinking. And it would be a more targeted, narrow, maybe there'd be 2, 3 potential vendors versus an approach where it's just kind of more wide open. And then you do your robust evaluation process with actual data. So that's where we landed. That's what staff's recommending to do. So some of the kind of this or that is going to be more important discussions post RFP as we really are able to bring to the board, yes, Camstra is nice, but here's the cost, here's the issues, or whatever the issue happens to be. The shut off. We may find that one vendor and it doubles the cost, and we look at the payback of not having to send folks out to shut it off and say it's not close to it, or the reverse. We just don't really yet have but we'll have hard actual data from the bids,
Got it.
from the
Thanks.
proposals.
Okay, Ben. And Paul, I think you were trying to clarify that as well. We're going to use the RFP to help us with some of those decisions. But I think just having a summary of how how the evaluation of the different technologies went and what we learned from that would be, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
On the timeline, Craig, I'm wondering if we should include some type of community awareness or community discussion process.
That's a good idea.
I mean, Larry, well, Diana was here too when PG&E rolled out the smart meters, their smart meters, right? It was in at least some parts of our service area fairly controversial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a big part of that is,
Sorry, yes.
yeah,
Yes.
And it still is controversial.
right. That once the vendor's selected, we'll know what the product looks like, how it operates, how it, affects our service area. And I think that's where we can specify what this AMI system is going to look like, because the vendor is going to be selected, 6 months in advance of the project, a full deployment starting. So that's where we can start letting folks know it's coming. This is what it looks like. These are the benefits of it. And, have a dedicated, literature section on the website about, the product that we've selected.
There'll be a dedicated public outreach segment of the project, and we just haven't quite gotten there yet. At that,
We should also anticipate what I believe will happen, which is the privacy issues.
right. There are a host of issues, as you were probably about to say, that we would need to talk with you about. Not the least of which would be, should we offer opt-outs? And then is there a cost for having that meter read? What should that cost be? What's the board's comfort level and staff recommendations, and where do those meet? And so there are a few issues like that we'll be discussing along the way for sure.
Yeah, I think this one's a little easier than the PG&E one because the sender is out,
Yeah.
In fact, when the IJ came and looked at mine, the only comment they had about it was, not the IJ, sorry, the ARC came and looked, they thought it was a problem from like skateboards.
Oh.
That the little antenna.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
potentially. I don't know if that's true or not.
All right.
I think one thing I'm hearing that's concerning me a little bit is I think you're getting a little bit of apples and oranges in your RFP. I think it's going to be a little harder to sort it out than you think. I think, when it's not quantified and it becomes subjective, then the valve, no valve, the shutoff valve, no shutoff valve. That it sounds simple, but what is the value? I don't know. That's pretty hard to assess. What is the cost of not having it? That's pretty hard to assess too. So trying to put it into quantifiable metrics is going to be tricky, I think. I'm just suggesting a little caution that don't get your expectations up too high, because the vendors are sophisticated too, and they'll know how to manipulate this, assuming they do, I think they will, to their advantage. Somehow they'll see it. Oh, well, we can push this part, or we're willing to eat that part to give you that. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think we're big enough project. We're not, LA Water and Power, that's for sure. But I think we're big enough to get their attention.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
On slide 5, I was just looking at these numbers on water savings and wondering if there's a way to increase them somewhat. And so I guess that was one question, but the highest percentage, well, I guess that's not true because you could, but the EPA notes AMI paired with a customer portal is 5 to 10%. Wouldn't it always need to be paired with a customer portal for it to be truly effective? Like what? So you have it in your home, but you're not actually reading the data? Is that?
Across the country, I've talked to quite a few utilities that have zero interest in a customer portal. The only reason they installed AMI was operational efficiencies, right? To get the reads through the air. But,
Interesting.
they're sitting on a 100-year aquifer, or they, the cost of water is so low that why even pay for a customer portal? Because nobody's even going to check it. If somebody has an issue, the utility always has the granular data. It's whether or not you want to pay for this like third-party customer portal to put it in the customer's hands. So customer portal is very common in California. Across the country, some are like, why would you need a customer portal?
Because I would think that would really enhance your savings, right? You're like, okay, wow, at this time using this thing, I'm really wasting a lot of water.
Right.
I would think it would be much less effective without that.
I think
You're
Craig's
right.
observation is exactly right, that it's the demographics
Uh-huh.
that you're responding to, and you're correct.
Mm-hmm.
Our customer base is the kind who would exactly want this.
Mm-hmm.
Right. For us, water
Interesting.
savings is a key project driver, and a customer portal is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And information is king, and they will respond to the information available. I can see exactly the opposite in certain places, that's like, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It's kind of like the software programs like Microsoft and that, the capability of Word is 1,000 times more than any of us uses, but it's there and there's probably 2 people in Marin that use all of the things that Word can do, but most of us don't. And it's the same kind of thing. I need it to get to a certain point, and after that, I don't really care. And each of us has a different point. That's a different place
Mm-hmm.
that we will use it or not use it. But it's nice to have it there.
That's how I feel about my car, Larry.
Exactly. The cars. The car's the same thing. Yeah. It's so much stuff, and it takes so long.
Yeah.
Especially these new ones. I mean, now that they've got unlimited storage, the drill down, it takes days to figure it out.
Yeah.
I rented a Tesla from Burbank Airport, and I had to stop at least 15 times. I rented it at night. I'd never driven a Tesla. I had to figure out how to change the mirrors, how to change the headlights. It's like worst rental car I've ever had because of too much dependence on that screen.
Yeah.
No switches. No
Yeah, I know.
mechanics,
It's really disconcerting when you first drive it.
especially to drop into it cold.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, I couldn't move it
Yeah.
to start with, right? Couldn't get it unlocked. And then they suddenly show me that, and I still don't understand their keys, with this thing that goes against the door handle and door handle. But I think that the AMI is easier. I mean, it's seamless. And I'm thinking about us. The only time I ever check it is when I'm going to make some comment at a meeting. When I want my wife to, she's the one that handles it. So, and she's a scientific person, but she's not particularly computer literate, but she figured it out, and she's able to get in there and, get the information we need.
Good.
Okay. Public comment.
Yes, Mr. Phil Sauter, please.
Thanks for your patience, Phil.
Oh, no problem. Thanks for the discussion. It's really interesting. I bought my house in '76, which was during that big drought. And what I did is I went out and took the lid off the meter and turned everything off, and then went around my house and ran each faucet for a minute. So I could tell you each faucet, what it was doing. That was something I really wanted to learn, and I spent some time doing it, and I haven't forgotten those numbers. And I think with the AMI, if people get a good experience with it one time, those numbers will stay with them even after the battery dies. So the only suggestion I would make is try to get this rolled out before the next drought. And that'll be a great opportunity for.
And when might that be, Phil?
What's that?
And when might that be?
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, sooner rather than later.
Yes.
It'd be a great time to have full AMI by the time of the next drought. People will really get engaged. And I would suggest making engagement part of the process and spend money on it. Maybe what you want to do is put in like a customer tutorial on site, have them fill out a questionnaire, and they get 10 or 15 bucks off their next bill for doing it. That might cost $500,000, but I think it's worth it. I would make that part of the RFP too, have the AMI vendor come in and say, here's some examples where districts have really been successful in getting customer engagement, and let that be part of what you ask them for in the
That's a good
RFP.
suggestion.
Those are just a couple of thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further speakers.
Okay, cool. All righty, the next meeting is July 22nd. Thank you.